The first snow came early that year. It fell over Briar Falls like ash, dusting the rooftops and dead fields, softening the scars left by the old church's collapse. But no one in town called it snow. They said it was bone dust, carried up from the ruins below. Eli Mercer drove his truck along the county road, wipers dragging slow arcs across the windshield. The world was pale and silent, the trees bending under the frost. Beside him on the seat lay a shortwave radio, tuned to static. Henrik's voice came through sometimes, rough and calm, reminding him what to look for. The night before, something had torn through the Dalton farm. Cattle slaughtered, doors clawed open. The sheriff blamed wild dogs. But Eli knew, because he had seen the tracks. Too large, too deep, and they led toward the old woods behind St. Ashwin's Hill. That was where he was headed now. He parked at the tree line, killed the engine, and listened. The forest breathed. He took the sword Henrik gave him, the reforged Van Helsing blade, shorter now, easier to wield. He'd practiced with it in the barn until his arms ached. He wasn't a soldier, but Henrik said the blade didn't care who held it, only whether they were willing. He stepped into the trees. Snow muffled everything. No birds, no branches cracking, just that still, breathless quiet. Eli followed the tracks deeper into the woods, past a line of withered pines. The air changed, colder, sharper, tinged with iron. Then he heard it, a low growl, too close. He froze, eyes scanning the shadows. Something moved between the trees, fast, low to the ground. Another growl echoed to his left, then another behind him. 3 shapes. They stepped into view. Not wolves. Not entirely human, either. Their bodies were gaunt, covered in mottled fur that thinned into flesh, faces stretched and broken, mouths elongated, eyes reflecting the faint light like glass. One still wore a shirt, torn, soaked in blood, the kind the Dalton boy had worn the day before. Eli's stomach turned. God, help me. The creature circled, one lunged. He swung the sword, the blade cutting clean through its shoulder. It howled, collapsing in a spray of dark blood that steamed on the snow. The others came at once. Eli swung again, catching one in the ribs, but claws raked across his arm. He stumbled, falling to the ground. The third creature leaped, but before it could reach him, a gunshot cracked through the trees. The beast jerked midair and fell, thrashing in the snow. Henrik stepped out of the shadows, shotgun smoking. "Didn't think you'd wait for backup," he said, reloading. Eli winced, clutching his arm. "They used to be people." Henrik nodded grimly. "Every one of them. The curse of the old cathedral. It's spreading through blood now." They stood over the bodies. As the snow fell thicker, Eli noticed something. The flesh beneath the fur was shifting, rippling as if alive. Henrik crouched, studying it. "They're still changing. The infection's not finished." "What do we do?" Henrik looked up. "We find the source before the whole town howls." They followed the trail through the woods to a frozen stream. There, half buried in the ice, was a stone altar, old, carved with the same sigil as its letters. There, half buried in the ice, was a stone altar, old, carved with the same sigil as the letters. The ice around it was melting despite the cold. Henrik's breath fogged as he spoke. "St. Ashwin's followers used to hold rites out here, sacrifices. Looks like someone's been feeding it again." Eli ran his fingers over the stone. The grooves were filled with dark residue. Blood? Henrik nodded.
Fresh.
As they spoke, a sound rose behind them, a howl, long and mournful, that vibrated through the trees. Henrik raised his gun.
We're not alone.
From the darkness stepped a single figure, taller than the rest, fur black as tar, eyes burning gold. Its mouth opened and a voice came out that was both human and beast.
Henrik.
The old man froze. Eli looked between them. You know it? Henrik's jaw tightened.
I did. Once.
The creature stepped closer.
You left us to die in the catacombs.
Eli's breath caught. Henrik lowered the gun slowly.
Jonas, I buried you myself.
The creature laughed, a sound of bones grinding.
You buried what was left. The rest belonged to it.
It lunged. Henrik fired. The shot tore through its chest, but the beast barely staggered. It slammed into him, knocking the gun away. They crashed to the ground, rolling through the snow. Eli swung the sword, striking its side. The blade flared with light, searing the flesh. The creature screamed, black smoke rising from the wound.
Get back!
Henrik yelled. Eli drove the sword into the beast's heart. The air cracked like thunder. The ground shuddered. The creature howled once, then burst apart into mists of ash and flame. Silence followed. Eli knelt beside Henrik, who was bleeding from a deep cut along his ribs. Are you?
I've had worse,
Henrik muttered. He looked at the sword, still glowing faintly.
You handled yourself well. Better than most recruits.
Eli glanced at the remains. That thing knew you. Who was he? Henrik's gaze drifted toward the trees.
Jonas Kelper. We served together. One of the last hunters from Project Sanctum. He went missing on a mission under St. Ashwin's ruins before the fire.
He paused.
I thought the cathedral took him. Looks like I was right.
Eli shivered. So this infection, it's from the cathedral? Henrik nodded.
The mouth beneath St. Ashwin. It feeds on faith, guilt, and blood. These beasts are just the first. The more it wakes, the more it twists what it touches.
He looked at Eli.
We've got to seal the ground before it spreads. But we'll need more than salt this time. Now help me out here.
They burned the remains of the creatures and buried the ashes at the stream's edge. The flames burned blue, then white, before dying out completely. On the way back to town, Henrik told Eli stories, fragments of his past. How, after the war, the government had formed secret units to deal with unholy threats. How he'd hunted vampires in Europe, ghosts in deserts, revenants in jungles. How his last mission had been right here in Briar Falls when St. Ashwin's Cathedral fell.
We thought it was over, he said quietly. But evil doesn't die. It waits for the mail.
Eli smiled faintly despite himself. So what do we do now? Henrik stared out at the snow.
We prepare. The wolves were only the warning. The real storm's on its way.
That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, listening to the wind howl through the pines. Every so often, he thought he heard the faint toll of a bell beneath the earth. He looked at the sword leaning against the wall, the metal dull in the lamplight. When he finally stood, it was because he heard a knock. Not on the door, but on the window. He turned slowly. Outside in the snow stood a figure. Not beast, not human, but somewhere in between. It stared at him with eyes like molten gold, and in its hand it held a letter sealed with red wax. Eli opened the window just enough to grab it, but then he looked again, and the figure was gone. The envelope was addressed in that same elegant script, to the Courier of Deliverance. Inside, only one line. The Black Post is open. Eli felt the blood drain from his face. He turned toward the distant church. Its ruins glowed faintly beneath the fog, as if something beneath it had begun to breathe again. The post office stood at the center of Briar Falls, as old as the town itself. Built from blackened timber and river stone, it leaned slightly forward, as though listening. The sign above the door had lost half its letters to rot. Briar Falls Post and Telegraph, leaving behind only Falls Post. But when Eli pushed the door open that morning, something had changed. The air inside was colder than it should have been. The lights flickered with a dull amber glow. And behind the counter, where the mail slots should have been, rows of sealed envelopes covered the walls. Hundreds of them. Each was stamped with the same crimson seal. Henrik stepped in behind him, gun at his side, breath misting in the air.
You feel that?
Eli nodded. The walls seemed to hum faintly, a low vibration that pressed against his chest. He held up the letter he'd received the night before, the one from the thing outside his window. It said the Black Post was open. Henrik frowned.
That shouldn't even exist. It was a containment term, a failsafe for cursed correspondence. Letters used to carry things, voices, promises, even souls. If someone's reopened the Black Post,
he trailed off, eyes darkening.
Then the mouth beneath St. Ashwin isn't just waking up. It's reaching out.
Eli approached the counter. A bell sat there, old brass and dust-covered. The moment his hand brushed it, every envelope in the room fluttered like wings. Henrik shouted,
"Don't touch!"
But the bell rang. The sound wasn't a chime. It was a whisper, deep, echoing, like the voice of someone buried alive. The lights went out. When they came back on, the post office wasn't empty anymore. Dozens of people stood in line, silent, pale, their clothes decades out of date. Some wore military uniforms, others, the black coats of clergy. Their eyes were hollow, mouths stitched shut with thread. Each clutched a letter. Eli stepped back, heart hammering. Henrik? But Henrik was gone. He turned towards the door. It was gone too. In its place was another wall of mail slots, each one slowly opening like eyes. A voice rose from behind the counter, calm and steady. "Welcome, courier." Eli froze. A man stood there, thin, with hair slicked back and skin gray like old parchment. His smile was too wide. "You've delivered well." Eli lifted his sword. "Who are you?" The man's head tilted. "Once, I was the postmaster. Now, I am the message itself." He spread his arms, and the air rippled. The envelopes peeled off the walls, swirling around him in a storm of paper and ash. "Do you know what they used to write in their letters? Prayers, confessions, pleas for forgiveness. All sent here. All unanswered." The envelopes burst open, words bleeding out like smoke. Whispered phrases filled the room. Forgive me. Bring him back. Save us. The postmaster's voice deepened.
And when no god answered, something else did.
The floor split open. Beneath the wood, black veins pulsed, roots reaching upward, glistening with dark light. Eli swung the sword, slicing through the air. The blade blazed with white flame, cutting through the fog of words. Where's Henrik? The postmaster smiled.
He's gone to collect a letter of his own.
Eli ran through the side door, into the sorting room. The ceiling sagged under dripping tar. Every bag of mail was twitching, something moving inside. He cut one open, hands spilled out, pale, clutching, still attached to fragments of arms. They reached for him blindly, grasping at his coat. He stumbled back, slicing through them with the blade. The walls began to breathe. Every breath filled the air with the scent of burned paper and rot. Then he saw it. A door at the end of the corridor marked undelivered. The knob pulsed like a heartbeat. He kicked it open. Inside, Henrik was standing before a stack of sealed letters, each one glowing faintly red. His eyes were glassy. In his hands, he held one open letter, trembling. Eli shouted, "Henrik, drop it!" Henrik turned slowly.
It's from my wife.
Eli froze. Henrik's voice cracked.
She wrote this before the fire. I never got to read it. The postmaster kept it and said it wasn't meant for the living.
He looked at Eli with tears streaking down the ash on his face.
She says she forgave me.
Eli took a step forward. It's lying to you. That's not her. Henrik looked down at the letter and smiled faintly.
I know.
He raised his shotgun and fired into the stack. The explosion shook the room. Fire roared up the walls, tearing through the letters. The red seals broke, releasing screams that rattled the ceiling. The postmaster's voice echoed through the building.
You cannot burn what is already sent.
The floor cracked open beneath them, and they fell into darkness. When Eli hit the ground, he was in a tunnel, stone walls lined with old mailboxes, each one engraved with a name. He limped forward, sword dragging behind him. Henrik followed, bleeding but alive.
The catacombs beneath St. Ashwin,
He muttered.
We're inside the root.
The walls pulsed faintly, alive with veins of black light. Every few feet, a mailbox burst open, spilling letters that crawled across the ground like insects. At the end of the tunnel stood an altar, and upon it a book, bound in human skin, pages made of letters fused together. The air trembled, and Eli whispered, "The mouth beneath St. Ashwin." Henrik loaded a single shell.
It's awake.
The ground heaved. A sound rose, not quite a roar, not quite a prayer. The walls peeled open like wounds, and something vast began to push through. The shape of hands, faces, and teeth, all woven together, whispered in unison. Eli shouted over the noise, "How do we kill it?" Henrik grinned through the blood.
We don't.
He tossed the shotgun aside, pulled something from his coat. Small tin cross wrapped in wire.
We deliver it.
He pressed it into Eli's hand. The metal burned, but didn't melt. Henrik stepped back toward the altar.
Every curse is a promise, waiting to be returned. Every evil A letter undelivered. You're the courier now, Eli. Finish the route.
Before Eli could speak, Henrik drew his knife and carved a sigil into his chest, the same one that sealed the cursed letters. The light burst from it, white and blinding.
Tell her I got the message,
Henrik rasped. Then he slammed his hand against the altar. The explosion that followed wasn't fire. It was silence. Everything folded inward. The tunnel, the letters, the voices. The mouth screamed as it imploded, its whispers dissolving into the wind. And then there was nothing. Eli woke in the snow outside the ruins of St. Ashwin's Cathedral. The sword was beside him, glowing faintly. The post office burned in the distance, flames black and soundless. He staggered to his feet. The ground beneath the church had collapsed into a crater. In the center of it, the altar was gone. On the ground near his boots lay one final letter, unburned, sealed in white wax. He picked it up. It was addressed to him. To the courier of deliverance. He opened it. Inside was a single phrase, written in a woman's hand. The dead remember who delivered them. Eli looked toward the town. Every mailbox on every street was open. Snow fell like ash over Briar Falls. The fire that had devoured the post office still smoked, turning the air sour. Eli stood in the ruin's edge, wrapped in Henrik's old coat. The Van Helsing blade hung across his back, dull now, its glow gone out with the night. The town was silent. No dogs, no crows, no engines. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. He looked down at the letter in his hand, the one written in a woman's cursive, the one that said, "The dead remember who delivered them." He folded it once and slipped it into his breast pocket. Something shifted beneath the snow, a tremor like breath. From far below, under the crater where the cathedral had been, came the faint toll of a bell. Not a warning, but a heartbeat. The crater gaped like a wound in the earth. Eli descended carefully, boots sliding on frozen soil. The ruins had changed. The stones were clean, almost polished, but veins of black light still pulsed between them like dying embers. At the bottom stood what remained of the altar, half burned, half buried, cracked open. Beside it, a human shape crouched in a drifting fog. "Henrik?" Eli called. The figure turned. What looked back wasn't whole. Half of Henrik's face was burned away, yet his eyes were calm, lucid. A faint blue light glowed beneath his ribs.
Didn't think you'd come back,
Henrik said, his voice echoing strangely.
Most folks would have run.
Eli swallowed hard. "You didn't leave me much of a choice." Henrik smiled, weary.
The seal held for now, but the mouth's still hungry. You can feel it, can't you? Under the stone.
Eli nodded. The ground thrummed underfoot like a second pulse. Henrik rose, movement slow, deliberate.
You've still got the cross?
Eli pulled it from his pocket. The tin was cracked, wires frayed.
That's not just a weapon,
Henrik said.
It's a key. The Van Helsing rite wasn't made to kill evil. It was made to redeem it. We forgot that part a long time ago.
He placed a hand on Eli's shoulder, leaving a faint shimmer of light.
You can finish it. Cleanse the root.
Eli stared at him. "And what about you?" Henrik looked toward the dark fissures.
I'll keep it still while you do it.
The bell rang again. The air rippled. The soil beneath the altar cracked apart, and a flood of black water poured out thick as oil. Faces formed in it, flickering, sobbing, then vanishing. Henrik drew his sidearm.
Time to deliver the last message.
Eli unsheathed the Van Helsing blade. The steel flared white again. alive with the symbol on his chest, the one Henrik had carved into himself. They stepped together into the dark. The tunnel below was the same as before, but alive now. Every mailbox on the walls opened and closed like mouths whispering names. Letters fluttered in the current, dissolving into ash. At the end, the mouth waited. It wasn't a single creature anymore, but a vast hollow shape formed of light and memory. A cathedral turned inside out, its spires made of bone, its choir a million lost voices humming one word: deliverance. Eli gripped the sword. What if I fail? Henrik smiled faintly.
Then you'll join the rout.
Eli stepped forward, raising the cross. The tin flared, projecting a circle of pale fire around him. The mouth shrieked, its edges recoiling. He spoke the words Henrik had taught him. Old Latin twisted through Norse cadence. Sanguis servat lumen, lumen liberet terram. Blood preserves the light. The light frees the earth. The wall shuddered. Henrik's voice thundered beside him.
Now, boy, strike the altar.
Eli drove the sword down. The blade sank through the stone, through black water, through the heart of the mouth. A roar like wind through a canyon filled the air. Every letter ever written to St. Ashwin burst into flame at once. Thousands of prayers finally answered. The darkness convulsed, then began to dissolve into columns of light. Eli staggered back, blinded. The Van Helsing blade blazed so bright it burned through his gloves. Henrik grabbed his arm, forcing his hand closed around the hilt.
Don't let go.
The old soldier's body began to fracture into light, lines tracing his veins. He looked at Eli one last time.
Tell her I read it.
And then he was gone, drawn upward into the rising brilliance. When the light faded, Eli was standing in an empty nave. The cathedral was whole again, not restored, but pure, its stones gray and warm under the morning sun that streamed through the openings high above. The altar had turned to marble. In its center lay the Van Helsing blade, now silver and quiet. Eli knelt, placing the cracked cross upon the stone. Route complete, he whispered. A breeze moved through the nave, carrying with it the faint sound of Henrik's laughter. He walked out of the ruins. The crater had filled with water, clear and still, reflecting the sky. Briar Falls spread before him, its chimneys smoking again, windows lit. People were moving about as if waking from a long sleep. He looked down at his hands. Faint runes glowed beneath the skin. The sigil of the courier. Weeks passed, the town rebuilt. The new post office rose from fresh lumber beside the river. Its sign was simple: Briar Falls Postal and Courier Service. Eli never applied to work there, yet every dawn, a leather satchel hung on the old bench outside his cabin, filled with letters no one claimed to have written. Some bore the names of the dead, others, those not yet born. He still walked his route, past the fields, along the forest road, into the valley where St. Ashwin once stood. Sometimes he felt another set of footprints beside his own, heavy, sure. He'd stop, smile, and keep walking. One autumn morning, the child found a single envelope in the hollow of a tree. The ink had faded, but the name was clear: To whom the route chooses next. Inside was a map of Briar Falls, a tarnished cross, and a line written in steady handwriting. The light is yours now. Deliver it well. The child looked toward the ruins, where mist drifted like breath over the still water. Somewhere in the distance, faint and rhythmic, came the sound of footsteps on gravel. Not hurried, not heavy, just steady, like a man who is out carrying mail.